the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. I find it, and we find it deeply regrettable that council members have opted to convene this high-level UN Security Council briefing on Gaza on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, knowing full well that that decision excludes Israel. And frankly, colleagues, it's a testament to how this council has prioritized a lot of performance over serious efforts to actually advance peace. Serious efforts that President Trump, Secretary Rubio, his team, and partners like Egypt and Qatar are engaged in right now as we speak, to end this horrific war. There have been over 80 council meetings on this issue since October 7th. The main outcome of these meetings, unfortunately, has been to embolden Hamas, to undermine and disrupt negotiations that are aimed at freeing all of the hostages and ending the war and ending the suffering that we all want to end. Unspoken today, in the last 2 weeks alone, Israel has suffered 2 terrorist attacks in Jerusalem on September 8th and at the Allenby border crossing on September 18th. We condemn these attacks. We offer condolences to the families of those killed. We call upon other countries to join us in a clear and explicit condemnation of this violence by Hamas and its ideological allies. And extremists like the terrorists who killed 2 IDF soldiers on September 18th have shown their utter contempt for the people of Gaza. Hamas has shown its utter contempt for the people of Gaza. They struck the very border crossing through which nearly half of all aid delivered to Gaza between May and September of this year has passed. Let me say again, Hamas struck the border crossing through which half of all aid through the better part of this year has passed. No country here would willingly allow terrorists like this to threaten its people. Israel should not be expected to be any different. And of course, has the right to defend itself from groups that wish to do it harm. As Secretary of State Rubio recently said, as long as Hamas exists, there will be no peace in the Middle East. And every member here has seen evidence of how Hamas has starved hostages, has tortured them. We've heard the testimony of freed hostages and what they've endured in captivity. And sadly, some endure still. We, the United States, again demand Hamas immediately release all 48 remaining hostages and their remains, cease putting civilians in harm's way, cease sacrificing their own people for propaganda aims, that they disarm, and that they surrender. This war could end today if that happened. But Hamas refuses. While Israel has accepted the negotiators' proposals, rewarding Hamas's refusal, whether with performative conferences or one-sided Security Council resolutions, colleagues, it undermines and it delays achieving the peace we all want. Unfortunately, yesterday's conference spoke to domestic audiences, but it will prolong this tragic war in Gaza, and it will prolong the suffering. Hamas stands emboldened today after that conference. We've rewarded its obstruction. We've undermined efforts to achieve peace in both the short and the long term. Unilateral recognition statements do not alter the reality on the ground. It does not alter the fact that there is not a Palestinian state to recognize. And at this point, there is no credible Palestinian partner for peace. The Palestinian Authority leaders from Ramallah are absent from New York this week because they failed to meet their Oslo commitments. The commitments were basic, including renouncing terrorism, renouncing violence, resolving issues through direct negotiations with Israel, the Palestinian Authority has failed to clear even those low bars. And their attempts to bypass negotiations through what can only be called lawfare, including at the ICC and at the ICJ, and its pushes for unilateral recognition of statehood. This charade it's disappointing. It is clearly fueled by domestic politics and has given Hamas a reward for refusing to surrender, as well as an incentive. They're now incentivized to hold on, keep holding the hostages in subhuman conditions. We call on the Council membership and the UN to change its course, to focus instead onto how to prevent Hamas from ever doing this again and to how to eliminate them, on how they should free the hostages and create a framework so that Gaza can have a better future than the life, that the people of Gaza can have a better future than the life they have endured under terrorists. Secretary of State Rubio recently traveled to Israel and Qatar to address the threat posed by Hamas, to advance the immediate return of all hostages, and to ensure humanitarian aid actually reaches civilians. And the United States will continue working tirelessly towards those ends. And the Secretary was clear. The United States supports a negotiated settlement that will lead to the release of every single hostage. The President was clear today in the General Assembly to that same end. We must lead to the elimination of Hamas, and we must end the war. In the interim, the United States has worked to support the delivery of humanitarian aid to civilians in Gaza with actual meaningful results. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has securely delivered more than 170 million meals directly to civilians. We have also seen the increased flow of humanitarian aid, including through UN entities. However, looting and diversion is undeniable and remains serious problems that must be addressed. The UN's own data shows that approximately 85% of UN aid sent to Gaza since May 19th has been looted. Colleagues, the fighting must end so the international community can concentrate on the very hard work of building a new Gaza, one that embraces peace and coexistence and rejects terrorism and violence. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
主席，
President, I thank Algeria, Guyana, Pakistan, Sierra Leone, and Somalia for their initiative to convene this meeting, and thank Secretary General Guterres for his briefing. President, the Palestinian question is at the core of the Middle East issue, bearing on the Middle East's peace and stability and global peace and security. Over 7 decades or so, the Palestinian-Israeli situation has time again fallen into turmoil and even led to the outbreak of wars, shaping the evolution of the international landscape and the development of international relations. Since the start of the current Gaza conflict, the Palestinian people have been deeply mired in suffering. Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iran, among others, are witnessing escalating tensions, and even Qatar has come under attack. The mounting conflicts and volatility in the Middle East have worsened the global security environment, dampened the economic outlook for the world, and ran counter to the common interests of the international community. It is therefore imperative to accord this issue the utmost importance and accelerate the resolution of the Palestinian question, which lies at the heart of the current turmoil. I will make 4 points. First, we must bring an end to the tragedy in Gaza without delay. The conflicts of the past 2 years have devastated Gaza with scenes of misery and destruction everywhere, yet Israel is stepping up its military offensive, causing even greater civilian casualties and displacements. Military means are not the solution to the problem. An immediate ceasefire is the right way to save lives and bring hostages home. We urge Israel to cease all military actions in Gaza without delay, fulfill its occupying powers' obligations under international humanitarian law, and fully restore access for humanitarian supplies. Last week, the Security Council's draft resolution on Gaza was vetoed once again by a permanent member. With deep disappointment, we expect the relevant country to effectively shoulder its responsibility and make earnest efforts to end this war. Second, we must de-escalate tensions in the West Bank. Israel continues to expand settlements in the West Bank, forcibly demolish Palestinian structures, conduct frequent searches, arrests, and raids, and condone settler violence. The occupying power has recently approved and advanced the E1 settlement plan. This dangerous act gravely violates international law and Security Council resolutions, undermines the territorial contiguity of Palestine, and erodes the foundations of an independent Palestinian state. We call on Israel to immediately cease all settlement activities, curb settler violence, and lift restrictions on Palestinian economic activities. Third, we must rectify the historical injustices suffered by the Palestinian people. Israel has long established itself as an independent state. The Palestinian people, however, remain without a homeland. This is the root of the problem. The two-state solution as the only viable way to solve the Palestinian question is irreplaceable and must not be denied. Yesterday, the UNGA high-level international conference on a two-state solution once again issued a strong call in support of the two-state solution. A number of Western countries have recently recognized the state of Palestine one after another. The international community should sustain the current momentum, strive to revitalize the prospect for the two-state solution, and support the early establishment of an independent Palestinian state and its early admission as a full member state of the United Nations. Both Gaza and the West Bank are inalienable parts of the Palestinian territory. We must resolutely oppose unilateral actions that undermine the foundations of the two-state solution. Any day-after governance and reconstruction arrangements must respect the will of the Palestinian people and uphold the legitimate rights of the Palestinian nation. Fourth, we must maintain peace and stability in the Middle East. From the onset of the current Gaza conflict, there has been frequent abuse of force and military adventurism, which have triggered profound changes in the regional landscape. The Middle East is once again standing at historical crossroads: relaxation or escalation, dialogue or confrontation, peace or war. These are the choices that the regional countries and us, the international community, should make collectively. We call on all parties to effectively respect the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of countries in the Middle East. We call on Israel to earnestly respect the rights to survival and development of the people in the Middle East, and call on countries in the region to prioritize long-term peace and security, uphold the vision of common security, resolve differences through inclusiveness, address conflicts through dialogue, come together to shape a regional order based on equity and justice, and jointly build a future of peaceful development in the region. President, China always upholds fairness and justice on the Palestinian question and always firmly supports the just cause of the Palestinian people. Chinese President Xi Jinping has put forward in succession the Global Security Initiative and the Global Governance Initiative, contributing a Chinese plan to resolve conflicts and hotspot issues, maintain international peace and multilateralism, and enhance global governance. This also provides important guidance for addressing Middle East issues. Guided by these initiatives, China is committed to working with the international community to promote a ceasefire, alleviate the humanitarian catastrophe, implement the two-state solution, and ultimately achieve a comprehensive, just, and lasting solution to the Palestinian question, so that both Palestinians and Israelis may live in peace and happiness, and the Middle East may embrace a future of lasting peace, stability, and shared prosperity. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, we thank the Secretary General for his report on the situation in the Gaza Strip. We welcome the participation in today's meeting of the foreign ministers of regional states and relevant international organizations. The crisis in Gaza, whose scale in terms of civilian casualties has surpassed any conflict in recent decades, has led to escalation throughout the entire region, with violent flare-ups in a number of neighboring countries. In this context, we understand the desire of our Middle Eastern partners to speak out on this urgent issue that directly affects each of them. Colleagues, in recent weeks, a number of major developments have taken place at the UN regarding the Middle East, clearly reflecting growing solidarity among the international community regarding the fact that what is happening in Gaza due to Israel's actions, regardless of the justifications for those actions, is unacceptable and cannot continue. Last Thursday, 14 members of the Council voted in favor of a draft resolution demanding an immediate and unconditional ceasefire, the release of all hostages held by Hamas, the lifting of the severe humanitarian blockade of Gaza, and the provision of safe and unhindered access to those in need. Unfortunately, the United States blocked that resolution, using its veto for the 7th time on this issue. A little earlier, however, the Council did manage to agree on a statement, albeit a very general one, condemning Israel's attack on the sovereign state of Qatar. The UN has so far failed to stop the bloodshed in Gaza or to compel Israel to return to the path of a two-state solution. However, over the past 2 days during the international conference at the General Assembly, important symbolic steps have been taken, with a number of countries recognizing Palestinian statehood. This is a belated but extremely important signal to Israel's military and political leadership, a signal that justice for the Palestinian people must be restored. Sadly, it took nearly 2 years of Israeli operations in Gaza and over 65,000 civilian Palestinian deaths for this to happen. Recognition of the Palestinian state is not a favor to Ramallah. It is a historic duty owed to the Palestinian people, one that should have been fulfilled nearly 80 years ago. Russia has been calling for this for decades. Let me remind you that the USSR recognized the state of Palestine back in 1988. Israel, however, not only remains deaf to the appeals of the international community, but, encouraged by its American allies, responds with threats, claiming that the wave of new recognitions of Palestinian statehood is allegedly a reward to Hamas for the October 7th terrorist attack. In West Jerusalem, there is open talk of formally annexing the West Bank following the high-level week. That is why a clear signal must be sent now that such steps are unacceptable. We must certainly not give in to any threats of retaliatory measures. As the Secretary General said, only our actions can put an end to what is happening. Colleagues, the international community's united support for the Palestinian people's aspirations to live peacefully in their own state is the momentum we must collectively build. We must work to translate into practical reality. The main task right now is to ensure that the crisis in Gaza is resolved not through brutal facts on the ground, in other words, by completely clearing out all Palestinians, which is the aim of Israelis' leadership, nor through their displacement from the enclave and its commercial redevelopment, as proposed by various radical Western plans. Rather, this must be done through humane, civilized diplomacy that unites efforts within the UN and regionally among Arab states seeking to help their Palestinian brothers and sisters. Palestinians are not the object of social experiments. They are a people with the same right to sovereign existence and development as our own nations. But diplomatic efforts of any kind will only succeed if Israeli authorities abandon their reliance on military solutions. They must recognize that this approach will bring nothing good for Israel itself, which simply cannot develop and live in security in the context of a military operation on all fronts. The second key element is for Washington to recognize all this as well and stop viewing UN fora and multilateral diplomacy as an enemy that supposedly obstructs American diplomacy on the ground. Unfortunately, what we currently see is the exact opposite. Both Israel and the United States continue to claim that West Jerusalem is acting humanely in its fight against terrorism. This is how Official Israeli reports justify strikes on hospitals and schools, attacks on humanitarian convoys, and the deaths of women, children, and aid workers. Hate speech and propaganda bring ordinary Israeli soldiers to kill dozens of innocent Palestinian civilians daily, sincerely believing that this is all for the greater good of the Israeli state. In this way, for nearly 2 years, West Jerusalem has been systematically constructing and imposing a distorted narrative in which Palestinians are second-class people who can be exterminated, displaced, starved, and killed even directly at humanitarian aid distribution points. UN leadership, its humanitarian bodies, and even member states calling for a ceasefire and humanitarian access are unabashedly labeled by Israeli representatives as terrorist accomplices. This radical, distorted rhetoric, along with West Jerusalem's clear intent to continuously escalate the situation in the region, a situation that is already drawn in Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Yemen, and Qatar, undermines any progress towards a peaceful resolution of the Middle East crisis. The Israeli strike on Doha, one of the key mediators in negotiations, clearly demonstrated that Israel is not aiming for diplomacy, but rather for endless war, even at the cost of the remaining hostages who, with this war, are left with no chance of survival. It is also clear that Israel's strategic endgame is to take full control of all Palestinian territory, both Gaza and the West Bank. Annexation plans are discussed openly, not only without hesitation, but with pride and a sense of fulfilling a historic mission. And these are not just empty words. Gaza is being systematically cleared, carved up into so-called security zones that shrink by the day. The West Bank is being built up with new Israeli settlements, and fanatical settlers, in the world's worst traditions of the colonialism of past centuries, abuse the Palestinian population and drive them from their homelands as the authorities stand by and do nothing. An aggressive settlement policy is being actively implemented, one where Palestinians are at best relegated to the role of ghetto residents and at worst to exiles. Mr. President, this picture of horrifying injustice, violence, and trampling of human dignity unfolding in the occupied Palestinian territory is a call to action. This is what hundreds of thousands of people around the world are demanding from us in the street: an end to the senseless bloodshed in Gaza and the liberation of Palestine. This is also what Israeli hostages and their families are demanding as they protest in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and other cities, calling for a comprehensive deal to release prisoners and end the fighting. No one wants war, not ordinary Palestinians nor ordinary Israelis. This heartfelt plea was voiced by Israeli citizen Galit Dan, whose daughter and mother were killed on October 7th. She said, "I don't want revenge, I want hope, in the name of those who have lost everything and those who can still be saved. Please stop the war." End of quote. Mr. President, we believe in the power of multilateral diplomacy. Although it has not always succeeded, over the 80 years of the UN's existence, it has been thanks to this diplomacy that the planet has avoided a third world war. We are confident that it can also help resolve the long-standing Middle East crisis. This requires the collective will of the international community, expressed not only in declarations from high rostrums, but in concrete actions. We strongly urge our American colleagues to cast aside their rigid positions and engage in the real efforts that the UN Security Council must undertake in accordance with its mandate to maintain international peace and security. This will only benefit your closest ally, whose security cannot be ensured by force alone. The fact that such an approach is a dead end has been proven by decades of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It is time to recognize that only a diplomatic settlement of the Palestinian issue based on the two-state solution can guarantee lasting peace in the Middle East, security for Israeli citizens, and the just aspirations of the Palestinian people for their own state. Otherwise, endless and senseless bloodshed will continue, claiming ever more civilian lives, sowing discord between new generations of Arabs and Israelis, and destroying any prospects that they might one day coexist peacefully and develop freely. This must not be allowed. We trust that other reasonable members of the international community share this view. We stand ready to work with them to finally make a peaceful and prosperous Middle East a reality. This is a historic responsibility of the UN, its Security Council, and each and every one of us. We urge that it be fulfilled. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for the statement. I now give the floor to the permanent observer of the State of Palestine.
Allow me at the outset to thank the Korean presidency of the Security Council for convening this important meeting, and to thank the OIC countries, members of the Council, for requesting this meeting to highlight the horrific situation in Gaza as world leaders meet here in New York. I also want to thank the high-level representatives participating in this meeting. Allow me to also thank Secretary General Guterres for his relentless efforts and his very moving and inspiring statements in these past 2 days. And through him, we wish to extend Palestine's gratitude to the entire United Nations and its personnel on the ground, with remembrance of those who were killed